The whole simulation, improv, and composition reading, it seemed pretty straightforward. I'm the least comfortable with composition, and that's just because of my repertoire bias. A lot of what's written for viola is, avant-garde and new, and I want to try to explore composition, but I just don't really know how to apply it to what I normally play. I don't know how accessible that kind of thing is. Roja Toccata Capricciosa, or any of the Hindemith solo sonatas, stuff like that. So the reading seemed pretty biased towards like tunes, and I suppose my question to you was like, how feasible do you think it would be to compose in modal styles or with atonal music and just focus on patterns, like with a complete non-musician audience?
Well, the basis of this idea, and this comes from the Wallace book, not the Teaching Artist Bible. What is it called? It's like Engaging the Concert Audience.
Yeah,
That's the title of the book. And this whole chapter is about how to just various examples, essentially, of interactive activities for the audience to either help compose a piece or improvise. Like one example they give is playing the bass line to the Beaver Passacaglia, and then having the audience sing over there because it's just a descending bass line, so it's pretty repetitive and simple to follow and things like that. Now, if you're talking about modal scales, I mean, it has to be something that the audience would be familiar with, like a pentatonic scale. And my impression is that when you're talking about a compositional activity, you want to involve them enough that they feel like they're contributing in some way, but you can't expect them to know everything that a composer would know about music. Like using an instrument with a visual example, like a xylophone with colors on it, so they can say the blue note or the green note, because they're not necessarily going to know note names. You know, you have to know your
oh
audience,
yeah,
and if you're working with music students that would know that, you have a little bit more flexibility. But the idea is to give them choices, like say, well, do you want to use this A section or this one? Like pick one or two, which one sounds better? So you're getting their input in the process, but you're not making them compose the whole piece and all of those detailed aspects. It's just making large scale decisions.
yeah. Thank you. Let me refine that a little bit with patterns. The Capricciosa uses a lot of ascending and descending minor thirds. Do you think the basis of a pattern is too far out there, or is that something I could try to integrate somehow?
I personally think that's a little too far. Um, if you remember like what he talked about with the canon in D, how he I guess assigned the audience to count the number of times the bass line appeared. So so even though the like I guess you could say if you take something like Hindemith, um, it's 20th century, and but there's something that's recognizable that I think the audience would be able to interact with that is actually would be easier than something like sequences or whatever you mentioned in the Rochka. Um, and and so like if I think what he's getting at here is if you kind of read into it is motivic development or motivic ideas over um, over at the same level of melodic contour or identification. And so, like, I think you'll definitely have a challenge if you'll definitely have more of a challenge if you're playing something that's definitely more avant-garde and kind of, I guess, vague in composition. But if you're playing something like Hindemith, which is not entirely that, it might be, I guess, more accessible because you have more of that motivic sort of structure going on. And that applies to a lot of his compositions, I think. I mean, at least that I know of. So
Yeah, no, thank you. I agree. I guess my only worry is that what I'll come up with will be accessible but elementary. I want people to understand it, but I don't want it to be like I don't want it to be.
What do you want them to understand?
I want them to understand like the mechanics of, I don't know, some arbitrary rhythmic entry point that I have yet to decide. But my point is like I want the exercise to be accessible but not like too easy because I don't want them to feel silly, you know?
Okay. Well, I mean, I know the piece. I'm not sure which part you're talking about, but if you want to get into a minor third sequence or something, like, don't even say that. You're going to lose them. They don't know what it is, and they don't care. But if that's something you want to draw their attention to for some reason, you could. You have to know what about it matters, whether it's the harmonic structure or whatever. But you could even just play it for them if it's short enough or memorable enough. A sequence, I would think, because that's how sequences work, is pattern recognition in the human brain and all of this. So if you just played it for them and asked them to sing it or something, and then went on with the piece, if it was something they could sing, that's a way for them to participate, and they don't need to know what a sequence or a minor third is to be able to use
Yeah,
it.
yeah, like if definitely something that they can sing, because if it's like a passacaglia, that's or a canon, that's something that's very easily um it's something that's very easy for the ear to catch on to.
Mhm. Yeah, and with the canon and D example, I believe the point of that was counting how many times the cello has to play the bass line is not really useful or interesting for the audience. It's something you can do, but that's not what you want to pay attention to when you're playing that piece. So something you could do that would be more fun maybe is have them sing that bass line and then have the violins come in and play the variations or whatever. So then they're participating, it's not that hard for them, and they're getting to see how the music builds, which is the point of the canon. And then you could take that activity further and have one half of the audience sing the bass line and then take people out to improvise or whatever, so then you're getting that participatory aspect.
Yeah. I just hope I can find a way to make this genre more constructive to composition, because I think it can be, but I need to decide how.
I have a question since I'm new to what's going on.
Yes,
So, are you guys planning for activities next semester using these tools or these methods? And is this audience expected to know music already, or is it also with people who aren't familiar with classical music?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have some lofty goals for that in the project, but at least our first entry point, we're planning on going to some of the elementary schools around Tallahassee, focusing on older elementary schoolers, maybe like 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So they wouldn't have had music experience yet, but would be going into music classes, because the idea is to give them that interest so they might pursue them in middle school and whatnot.
I like the idea of finding things to sing, and that's always something to engage. But the other, I guess, another activity that you can bring in is always focusing on feeling and emotions. So if it is something super abstract, it's trying to find how the kids are feeling from something weird. If you're bringing Hindemith, and
Yeah.
you can always ask them, like, what does this thing sound like to you? And then you can always bring in other aspects. I've done interdisciplinary activities where I ask them to draw out things after hearing something. I don't know if that's something, I don't know if you just want to focus on music, but with abstract or atonal music, it's harder to get people who haven't sung a lot to sing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's a really good idea. The drawing bit, that's really fascinating. How did you use that, if I can ask?
Well, these kids were beginners also, so I just played some classical music and I asked them to draw what they felt, and some kids were more creative than others, but I think they enjoyed it because there's like another engaging activity that they're doing. I've also, if you ever watch activities with Dalcroze, I've seen instructors play certain chords and then ask kids to demonstrate that shape of how it feels. So things that are like a perfect fifth feels like a certain way, and then minor second feels a certain way. You can also play certain things in that piece and see if they like feel a certain way with their body, because things that sound weirder might make a more contorted shape. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that idea. I wish Erica was here now, because she was talking about this last time. Some cellist, or I don't know who it was, came and they did like an improvisatory dance sort of activity, and I could see how that would be fun for kids, and you could get them to participate in it if they're young enough to not be embarrassed. So.
Yeah.
it's
I guess it's easier in a group too, because if you see a friend doing it, you might be more willing to do it.
That's also a really good idea. The physical demonstration of shapes and things. Thinking of just not doing composition-based interaction with this newer stuff. Maybe not for the first time.
Well, usually when you're doing a composition activity, it's with a composer. Like there's a collaboration there. Where we would not be doing that because we're not composers and we're not composing our own music. But if you've got someone in here like Bryce or Lila, maybe that could be their point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I know Mac is doing
my
some
class
stuff with
piano
film scores.
class.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I had both of them in my class piano class, and they actually did an activity like that where they like got the class to compose based on a progression or a bass line or something. But with kids, you wouldn't want them writing it out because they don't know anything about the writing. So they would have to sing something, I guess what Elliot was saying, like more motivic. I think that's a little easier. And then if you build on a motive with kids.
Yeah. I'm sure this is something cabinets will talk about, but the distinction we're coming up to here with some of the examples is, do you want them to actively compose the music, or do you want to give them a role in the decision-making process? Because both are important in composition, and you can do both, but depending on the age group, one or the other might be more appropriate. Like, with little kids, they're probably going to be more engaged if you're getting them to do something, like draw along with the music, than if you just play them a 3-minute section of a piece and be like, well, do you like this better, or do you like this better? Whereas with some older students or older musicians or just so students who have music experience, they might have a longer attention span and be more keyed into that and have a stronger aesthetic preference. Because an important part of it is that they're actually making a choice. They're expressing some kind of a preference. They're not just randomly saying one or the other, because then they're not really participating in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's true. You definitely have to read the room. And that's something you can just as easily decide beforehand, like you said, with whatever demographic you end up with.
Well, it's just that it takes a different kind of preparation. Because the idea with the choices is that you play through a composition at the end, but it's almost like a choose your own adventure game, but with a piece. So it's like, well, do you like this movement better? Do you like this exposition better, or whatever? But you maybe wouldn't put it in those terms. But just you're providing them with choices. So you played one section, and then you play the alternate for that section, however many there are, and you get the audience to vote on it. And then once they vote on all the sections, you play it through at the end. And that's their piece that they composed, even though all of the music was pre-written by a composer. It's just it had different choices. And I guess a lot of community groups have had success doing that, according to the book.
How do they remember all that? Do they just have like motives that are colors and then they just remember the order of colors and play it? Or you just
no. The color example was specifically talking about writing melodies.
Oh, sure, right. I was just
That's a more detailed process, I guess.
Yeah, my working memory is a work in progress. That's not something I could do.
You know, there is one example I can think of that it was a concert I went to at the Naples Phil. I don't know if you were there or not, but it was this young Canadian pianist. He played Shostakovich's Second Concerto, and for the encore, he did this interactive thing with the audience, and he was just like, pick 2 notes, any notes, because people in Naples most have some musical background, and they give a bunch of youth orchestra students tickets. People were just shouting at random notes. And somehow he ended up at B and B flat. And I can't remember if it was just supposed to be a melodic motive or the key in which it was based, but he was like, oh, thanks a lot, that's a half step apart. But then he supposedly composed this whole piece based on those 2 notes in front of us. It was like 5 minutes long, and it was really cool. And I don't know if he actually composed it there or if he just like has things set that he does. I don't know, but it was cool. And it was cool that we felt like we were involved in his process somehow. He was able to do that.
Have you heard of Ben Folds? Like the pianist Ben Folds?
Yeah. Remember when I showed you that video?
Yeah. He came to Charleston and he did the same thing.
Oh. It wasn't Ben Folds. He wasn't as famous as Ben Folds, but yeah, that's the idea.
Even if it was pre-prepared, that's still a good idea.
It was very impressive and fun to
Yeah.
watch. Yeah.
As long as there's that satisfaction, then by
I
whatever.
mean, in a way, you have to
Suppose.
prepare to some extent. The important part is that the audience feels like they were involved in the process. You know, whether he's actually composing it right there, which is maybe more impressive. But either way, you're making a choice in what he ends up performing, which is what's fun for the audience.
Right.
So I kind of want to go back to what like Christina was saying about not just pointing out like motivic material or sequences, but like also emotion. And so the cellist in the article, and I think it's Blurring Boundaries, Claire Bryant.
Yeah.
She was actually in a virtual festival that I did last year during the summer. It was the the Charleston Chamber Music Institute one.
Is she the one that teaches at College of Charleston?
No, USC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why
I
she
thought
was
that
doing
was
those.
her.
That's why they were doing that project in South Carolina in the prison with the Strauss.
I bet Jordan knows her. Anyway,
Probably,
yeah.
but she didn't exactly do this sort of activity, but she did do an interactive activity, and I think I think she got bonus points for this because it's the fact that her activity can also be applied virtually, like over Zoom or something like that. And so, if I can remember it well enough, she would post a picture of a piece of artwork, and it wasn't something that was like um, it wasn't something that was like from the classical era or romantic era or the impressionist. It was avant-garde like artwork and really obscure artwork, and she would have us look at it for like 1 minute, and then after that we would write down, I think we would write down our thoughts, and then she would play a piece of music, and really tried to emphasize to us that we had to remember what that piece of art looked like. And then after we listened to the piece of music, we wrote down what we were feeling at the present moment, whether it was like if we see anything, or if we smell anything, if we taste anything, or if, you know, of course, if we hear anything, or what we're like thinking. And so she didn't really tell us like to draw anything after she played music, but that is certainly probably another thing that to include if we wanted more of a like a hands-on experience for the audience.
That's something important to consider virtually as physically, and I think that's something that is good to have in our kit. In either one.
That's a good example. I mean, I even would just think of our music history class and how she would show us paintings and be like, how is this an example of this? Or how does this make you feel? What do you notice about this? And on it, out of any of my Zoom classes, she got us to participate more than anyone, I think. You know what I mean? Did you find that too? Because it's just involving people in that way. I think you learn better while you're doing it.
You had Rachel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
There's another example, I don't know if it was in this reading, but it's definitely from the Wallace book. That was George Crumb's Black Angels. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that piece, but they did a similar example with composition, just asking the audience, you know, how does devastation feel? I mean, it's a pretty heavy piece, the thematic matter in it, but just taking some of those emotions and asking the audience, well, what does this sound like? How do I make this sound on the viola that would express that? And just getting the audience to experiment with that. And then they demonstrated some of the extended techniques that Crumb uses. I think there's something with a paperclip, and just showing them, well, this is how this composer made these sounds with our instruments, and then played the piece through with them. And apparently they did that a lot of different places around New York, and it's been some of the most successful performance of that piece in history, which is kind of remarkable. It's very, you know, crunchy music. It's not pleasant to listen to. It's not supposed to. But when you use that as an entry point, it helps people understand why music like that exists, and it makes them more open to listening to it.
Really fascinating. So if I can change topics to the simulation aspect of the reading, I selfishly wanted to do something out with Dvorak's 13-string quartet, and I thought I'd do a rhythmic exercise with the third movement, just because it's based on a Czech folk dance. And what I ended up doing, it's backwards, but I wrote out like the rhythms of, I guess, the melodic content of that movement. Like there were a few introductory bars, but I like the idea of dividing the audience into groups. So down the line, if I can wield that at any point in any capacity, I am there. I love that piece so much.
Yeah, I think the rhythmic motives are one of the easiest ways to get people to understand like standard string quartet rep because of how motives are passed around. Now, if you were to actually do that activity, I don't think you could write it out like that and expect them to be able to, because you can't assume they know music. Yeah, but you would clap it for them. You just have to make sure it's simple enough for people to obtain. But if you even just think about those clapping exercises they have kids do, like to get their attention and stuff. I mean, if you can do that and then have a group pass it around, they're basically on their way to becoming a string quartet. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, no, this is just my own reference, but
yeah,
just think like the entry point for that specific movement is just like this rhythmic dynamo that it has.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what that sounds like. I don't know if I could do it with someone or clap a rhythm with someone over Zoom because it'd sound weird. But
oh yeah,
did you show us like what each line like sounds like? I guess.
Can you clap it for us?
Yeah, sure. So the rhythmic material starts with the lower strings with the viola and cello at the same time. So the viola has and then the cello has.
It's running out.
So the effect is like
sound on maybe.
Oh dear.
If that doesn't work, maybe just play it for us. Let me see if I can find a score.
And play it from a distance, maybe.
I mean, I could just share my screen and get it.
Okay.
If you're that curious.
Here, I found a score video. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because I mean, for us, it'll help to be able to see the score to figure out like how we would take that for some kids.
Yeah. Did you want me to share my screen? I can do that.
Please.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to open up the video first. Get to the right movement. I mentioned that it's a bit into the movement. Oh. Let's see. Just give me 1 second. All right, well, we'll just start from the beginning of the third movement. It's like 30 seconds anyway. It's not that long. Here we are, share screen. Sorry, just 1 second. There we go. And share sound. Okay. Oh, great. It is blurry.
No, what?
We'll just...
Maybe fix the quote. Well, we can see the outline.
Oh, it fixed itself. Yeah, and so on, and so on. But I just think that's really cool.
What group is that playing?
That, oh dear. That is... Havelhaus Quartet. I've not heard of them until that point.
They're good. They're a European group, I think. Anyways.
Yep. Oh, sorry. You're gonna say something, sorry.
Me? Oh no.
Oh, no, Carly. Okay, but anyways, I feel like you could do a simple version with a rhythmic activity involving 4 groups, or like emulate a string quartet, and then you kind of carry it over to the Dvorak, and then like show them that this is also happening, even if it's more complex or faster. I feel like you could still do an activity with the rhythms if you didn't want to use this exact rhythm, or just slow it down. Or I think it's a really fun activity.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know that they're
Like
going
the
to be
rhythm
able
is
to play
the thing.
the rhythm and the melody, but you could do something with the 3 pattern, like just. They're going to be able to do that, or the other one that's a dotted rhythm. You could just have the audience clap that, and then play along with the cellist or the violist, or whoever has the ostinato at that point, so they see which member of the group they're connected with, and then you could layer the other parts on top of that, because then they're getting to see how you build a string quartet from the ground up, which is kind of like a compositional idea, really, other than it's already composed.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, the effect I wanted to get across was just like the rhythmic overlay, and how there's just like this da 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 da. That's this infectious thing. That's a part of the Czech folk dance.
You can start off with clapping it slow, and then you get them to go faster, and then have them in those groups of each part, or just start off slow, and then even if they don't get it perfectly, it'll still be fun.
And then they get faster, and then suddenly we start playing it, and then everyone's like,
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone's looking to be in a string quartet, we're doing that. Good to hear. Thank you for that. I'm glad to pick your brains on that little topic. But that's all I had from the reading. Anyone else want to share their thoughts?
Well, one thing I was wondering about in one of the Cabinus articles, I think it was not Blurring Boundaries, but the other one, maybe it was Blurring Boundaries, you'll probably remember, Elliot, is they kind of criticized this idea of an outreach paradigm, which I found interesting because we've been using the word outreach a lot in, just marketing this thing. And it's something you hear about a lot is outreach concerts. We have to do outreach concerts. But the point of it was actually something I agreed with, is that we shouldn't think of, it being that we're reaching out from what we do on a daily basis. That idea of serving the community should be central to what we do as musicians. I was just wondering what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, I think the idea undermines the very cause we're trying to uphold. And you can say the same thing about several subjects. That's also an idea in an element of New Age feminism. I agree with it completely. As to how to manifest it in a way that uses different terminology, well, there's no precedent for that, because no one's really acting on that assumption, and everyone's sort of doing it and labeling it as such, which is difficult in the sense of money. Like you have to label what you do to people to give you money. It's a lot harder to just have a talk with your board and get them to understand that this is something that should just happen. But the board sees, oh, an outreach concert, this is something that can be marketed and stuff like that. Like there are more tangible rewards to selling the idea of an outreach concert. Although I agree that it shouldn't really be the case, and this spiritual and social edification should be enough. It's just tough to manifest because you have to have a bottom line, which sucks because having music operate within a business framework is limiting for those exact reasons.
Are you saying it's more about the hustle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah, I mean, when you're applying for grants, that's just what I don't really know how else you would say it. That's something I think Booth was talking about, is that it's very attractive for all these foundations to talk about doing outreach concerts and how they're going to expand audiences and make everyone more money, and that's not really true. But the more we talk about it, the more we apply to grants for it. People seem to want to give people money to do that, regardless of whether or not it's working. But maybe they'd like to believe it is.
But is it not working because we're calling it that, or is it that we're calling that so it's not working?
Well, no, I don't think it's about the semantics of it. It's more about the idea behind what you're doing. That I was more getting it, not that he's calling it outreach. I thought it was interesting that he was, but just that we have this idea in music of why we do outreach concerts. And I think that everyone here is hopefully here because they think of it in that way of serving the community as being central to your role as a musician. But the reality is a lot of people don't, which is why we don't see more things like this. It's just an extra obligation for them to fulfill, or service hours for an artist musician, or whatever you want to get into.
This goes to saying about something that he pointed out, or Cabinets pointed out in Blur Boundaries.
I think it was that article.
Yeah, so he argues that when music education, like when you hear the word music education, he argues that it's in service of creating community, and it's not for the sake of the term itself. And so he also says, he also poses like a rhetorical question earlier, like, are we really teaching like artists to use music through community engagement and enhancing the community, or are we just using it for personal gain and income? And so, it's just kind of unfortunate to hear from many colleagues that they pursue something like music education. And I literally hear this because they get paid like decently or something like that. I've literally heard this on campus. And so, we gotta, I think it's good to like, I'm not saying that it's bad to hustle, but at the same time, it's good to think, to have a bit of really reality check when you're trying to advertise community engagement. You want to kind of sell it, but you don't want to sell it in a way that it's just all about how much money can we get or how much money we need. But we have to find a way to really make a point that this is for the community, and that music does the job, and it's not just about the money that does the job for everything here. So it's just a way, we got to figure out a way to like manifest that.
Right, I agree with that completely. And money is how you manifest it, which is the unfortunate reality. But at least if we found so far, people are willing to give us money to attempt to do this. You need money to do it, but it's not about the money. It can't be, because if you're going out into the community under the premise that you're doing it to help people or whatever, connect with them, but it's really about the money, you're going to come across as ingenuine because you are, and they're going to know that, and it's not going to be meaningful. So what I got is the major takeaway from that article is you just need to consider what the audience's needs are, and that's something that isn't always going to be evident, and you have to be careful not to assume that. And that does mean getting out into the community and taking time to genuinely get to know people, and what they want and how they can benefit from music and how it can be meaningful to them. Because if you just go in and tell someone, well, this is why this matters to me, so it has to matter to you too, that's not going to work. You're just going to push people away. And that's why the community building part of it is so important.
Yeah. As far as a local manifestation of that, I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, I don't want to figureheads, but like people, like representatives that we could talk to, not politically, but like community representatives, people who reflect what Tallahassee's about and what it needs and stuff. It's like one thing to just talk to your barber or whatever, but is that enough? Or with like teachers and stuff like that? And then you have to.
Well, why don't we start small? So we're gonna go play for a bunch of third graders at various Leon County schools, elementary schools. So how do we find out what that community needs? It's a bunch of kids, and yeah, we could say they're going into music classes, so we're gonna play them to teach them stuff about music. But is that really what they need? Is that what they want? That's something we can do. But how do we better assess that audience's needs?
I think the only way of doing that is actually playing for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a good opportunity to use this as an experiment, as to like
experimenting on children. Oh dear.
Yeah, no, I'm serious.
This is recorded for posterity. Let's be mindful.
No, but if you think about it, I mean, it kind of is, and it's a psychological experiment, not one that's unethical, but it is. So the only way that we can find out how we can truly know what they're experiencing, or at least have a good assumption of, is if we actually do play for them and help them interact with the music. That's why schools are so good too, because you have kids that will give you their undivided attention if you allow for them to respect you.
Right, I think you're right. But what I also want to get at is
Wait, but I could be wrong though, because I think maybe Christina might know a bit more.
She is, but what I'm getting at is I want you guys to think about how do we prepare for that before we ever play for them.
Prepare for what? Having the kids respect you, or
prepare for their needs. How do we assess their needs before we ever play for them?
Right. I think that might come from conversations with the right people.
Yeah, you can just ask the teacher who teaches them what they're doing in class and what she thinks or he thinks would benefit. But I wanted to say that my trio actually went to a middle school and did an activity, and we played the Piazzolla seasons, but for piano trio. And we did a combination of question, answer kind of things and playing. So in the beginning we had a little talk and we played, and after we asked them like what did they hear, what did they feel, if they had any questions. A lot of them had questions about instruments and like how much do you practice and all that. So definitely playing, I think, is a good idea, like what Elliot was saying, because I don't think they get a lot of that. They just don't hear good playing. And then Pedro, he did another kind of community engagement with his quintet where they tried to tell stories. Their acting is horrible and their script was horrible, but the kids thought it was funny. So they would act out certain folk tales and then play the music that was associated with that folk tale or their country. And so they love like playing is important, I think, and then also doing something in addition to the playing, whatever that is.
Oh, that's really cool. I'll have to talk to him about that during a TSO break.
Yeah,
they three of you all going to be around in the fall for the next year?
We're all leaving.
Yeah. Because see, this is what I'm glad you're here because you have that experience to speak to. But what I want to be one of the long-term goals of this project is so we have a set group of people at FSU, students that are doing this, and so they can learn to do this. Because it's great that groups like yours have taken the initiative to do that. And I know there's Sinfonia and Gulf Coast, and Classical Revolution was running for a while, although that wasn't as much interactive based. But there's never been like a large-scale organized effort. And I think there's so many musicians in Tallahassee, it's really a shame that it doesn't exist.
But now
that's what we're trying to do.
It gives you the opportunity to start it, and then finally someone's doing it. But you're right. I think when my quintet was talking to one of the deans or whatever, he was talking about the entrepreneurship program and how like no one does anything, like no one engages with the community, and the people who do, it's because they took their own initiative. It's not because there was a program or the school encouraged them. It's because someone decided, okay, I'm going to do it because no one else is doing it. But I think, yeah, you guys should definitely you guys got to do it this year. But yeah, if you ask the teachers like what they think is missing or what they think is beneficial, that'll help. And if you just come prepared with questions or activities like what you're doing, you're going to be fine. You're going to have fun no matter what, as long as you aren't just lecturing.
Right.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's really important to keep in mind.
I think you guys are on the right track. It seems like everything is gonna be good. All these ideas are, I think, really engaging. And take on from it.
Cool. Carly, have you gotten any word on Tekla or?
I don't think she's coming.
Okay, right.
No, but yeah.
Okay. Do we want to discuss then goals, or do we want to continue with the reading?
Yeah, well, we can ask Elliot. I mean, Christina, you're not going to be around, but of course we encourage you to keep participating and get. What
Yeah,
you can.
I still love doing this kind of thing, and I wanted to start a nonprofit. So
Yeah.
like, I wanted to read and like listen to lectures and stuff. Because I do want to do something that's more on. I don't like calling it outreach.
Huh.
I wanted to mention I love that conversation you guys had about like the word outreach and using that. When I was in undergrad, I participated in this program that gave free lessons to kids in the community, and they originally called it Carolina Outreach, and they changed the name because of that reason. So now it's called Musical Empowerment, because they're trying to find a way to make it not sound like, oh, we're helping the community because they're lesser or something.
Right.
But I was thinking maybe you have to think about finding your purpose. It's not just about bringing it to the community, but what is so important about music education for these kids. I was reading some Suzuki philosophy, and a big part of Suzuki is making better humans and just making sure people are kind, and that's the point of music. It's not just becoming a virtuoso, but becoming a great person. And maybe when you're applying for grants, I don't know, you can try to bring in more philosophical ideas that aren't just about engaging with the community, but you're actually building people to become creative, imaginative, empathetic people. That's just better for the next generation, because that's what we're lacking in a lot of places, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Now, let me just ask you, since you don't like the term outreach, what do you prefer to use instead, or just like lean towards?
Right now I say engagement. You're
Okay.
engaging with your audience, I guess. You guys are using the word engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you haven't already, you should definitely go read Engaging the Concert Audience, because that book is just filled with examples and resources like this, and the Teaching Artist Bible too. That's Eric Booth's book. That's what we're working off of for this course. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff,
I have the Eric Booth book. I just
You
haven't
do?
finished
Okay.
reading. But
Cool.
yeah, I want to read all these things that you posted. I was trying to read those articles.
Oh yeah. There's a bunch on Chamber Music America, Lincoln Center Activate, and all of those New York organizations that are doing stuff. There's a ton out there just for free on the internet. It's great. You just gotta take the time and take advantage of it.
You said you wanted, yeah, you wanted to talk to me, right? You said Elliot.
Like earlier? Is that
Yeah.
Okay, so for this goal setting, yes, but I want to pose this question to everyone, and I'd actually like Christina to start, if it's okay, since you're probably in it for like the shortest term. But just in participating in this, what would you like to get out of it the most, and where would you like to see it go long term? I suppose that's what I want to hear from everyone.
Okay, so I guess I can go first. I think what I would want to get from a program like this is finding out how to start and be successful in the long run. So sometimes it's easy to just start off with one project, but how do you sustain that? And how do you make sure people continue to want that product? And then I guess I would also want to learn how to actually market and gain traction. I know there's like a lot of things that people talk about, and not all of them work.
Sure.
And yeah, I think marketing sometimes is hard. Yeah, that's what I would want to get from it, I think.
Yeah, sure. That's important, definitely. All right. Matthew or Elliot, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. I am not acquainted with this particular avenue of musicianship, and it's something I hope to explore on a more spiritual level. I want audience engagement to sort of help me connect with my love for music, because it's one thing to say like, oh, this makes kinder people and stuff, and I get that, and like my brain recognizes that as a truth, but I just think it would be so rewarding. I don't know, maybe this sounds selfish, but I don't want to say I'm in it for myself, but I would love to have the experience of like doing this successfully and seeing results, like seeing shining eyes in the audience and stuff like that. I would love that so much. So I suppose what I want is to understand the mechanics and how to do this well in order to gratify my own spiritual desires.
Right.
So, if I wanted to describe like where I wanted to see this going, if it was that was the question, right?
What you want to get out of it, where you want to see it go. It's like a two-part question.
Okay, so I guess it's like one answer, um, in the I guess it's an answer in the form of two or whatever. But um, I really like what Christina said when she was talking about how there's not really an organization or organizations that help students or people like us or young artists go out there and help create a concert program for audience engagement. And it's kind of like how we have to take, or how people have to take their own initiative and do it, and just flat out like do it and go for it, like just all in or nothing. And so um, I would I would like to see this take off at least for the fall semester. Maybe just like at least just one concert or one day of audience engagement where we are able to have an experimentation with what we're doing by playing for an audience like a school. Um, doesn't necessarily have to be something big like a prison, but I think definitely something like a school is good to start off with. But at least like once this semester, and then um, with high hopes that it'll work out later on, do it again like spring semester. It doesn't have to be like something that's every month, but I definitely think with this project, it definitely needs an initiative, some sort of like push to uh, actually like hit ground and start from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can have our thoughts and we can have our reflections and our moments of, oh man, how would this would just be so wonderful, huh? But we actually like we won't be able to like know that for sure if we actually do something, like play.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, um, I think the way that I see it is if we're able to have some sort of initiative, we can have this one day um, out of the fall semester where we can just dedicate it to audience engagement and
Mm-hmm.
just see what happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a perfect outcome. It's again, this is something that we can experiment with, and I think would be beneficial to the mission of U3 that created this. So
Well, I know we're gonna be able to do something. I don't know what it's gonna look like, and I don't know how many people we're gonna have, but
that's okay, and I think that's okay. But you know, I think that those sort of logistics can come like later. But if we can kind of start, planning, um, have in mind where we want to outreach. We already mentioned schools, okay? Um, our repertoire, we kind of have that going right now, and also solidifying a plan as to how we can engage audiences with our repertoire. I mean, that's already like, I think that's the bulk of the whole project, and then the logistics will like come later. So yeah,
Seems like you just need to contact a teacher or a school
yeah,
and just find a date. Just say we really want to work with you guys. Instead of saying outreach, you can just say we want to work with you. Are there any dates available?
Yeah, it's
Is the timeline of when we're gonna do this, which is part of why I wanted to have Tekla here. But as I see it right now, we kind of have two options for the direction we can take in the fall, and it's really up to you guys who are going to be performing and what you want to do. Is we could either try to set something up at the beginning of September, which would mean sooner rather than later, and it would be soloists. You all either presenting your own program, or maybe 2 or 3 people at a time presenting on different related things. So that's solo rep. Or we could try to do something with chamber class and get a couple of groups involved, or even just one group and like learn one piece and do that. But we'd have to push it later in the semester just because of how the timeline of that class works. So it's really just up to the people we have and what you guys want to do. I'm fine with
I see. I'd be open to the idea of both.
Yeah, we already talked about this. I'm asking Elliot. Remember, this is our meeting from last week.
you're asking me about dates.
I'm asking you which of those two options you would prefer.
So like September or like at the end of the semester.
It wouldn't be the end of the semester. It would be like September or October on, either.
Okay, so September or October.
Yeah.
I personally would prefer September, knowing like I know every time October comes around, it's always like a lot's going on. So I would maybe September, and like maybe a day like a Monday might work, because like if it's on a Friday, then kids will want to go home because it's the weekend, and there's a chance that maybe Christina can attest to this better, but like there's probably a chance that the kids will have maybe less attention because they're all excited for the weekend. So
yeah, I mean, even though you're not playing, Christina, we'd love to have your feedback on this.
In my experience, I didn't have a choice with when it was.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, this is the time you have, and we just went.
Uh-huh.
But you can always, it depends on the teacher, and maybe they'll ask like what time or what day they want you to come. But I think that's situational. Just in my experience, I wasn't given the choice. But is there a reason why you can't do both and just have like some people do one, and then if there's people who have time, they can do the second date? Or you just don't have enough money? Or
we don't have enough people right now is the problem. It really depends on how many people we get, which is kind of why I'm leaning towards doing the September one, because I know we could do that. That one's more of a sure thing. And then at least, we'll have done it, and hopefully that will attract more people to do it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That is my hope. What do you think, Matthew? Because I realized even though we talked about it, you didn't really express a preference. So what are your thoughts?
My only concern is, again, another selfish one. Maintaining personnel in the light of grad auditions and stuff. I don't want a lot of people to say yes, and then we go ahead and plan it, but then they're like, oh, actually, no, I have to do these grad audition things, and then just drop out, and then we're just left to cook.
That he actually brings up a valid point, because I was actually thinking of December as well, because I know that finals week is what, the second or third week? No, second week of December, full week. But however, I think many of us will be done with pre-screenings at least.
Yeah.
So that could be an option, is the second week of December, or just whatever in December, when the kids are still in school. So
I mean, that's something to consider, I guess. I kind of wanted to have it done before then, but if we're going to do it in September, you guys just have to commit and be like, we're going to do it no matter what. I'm too busy with auditions or practicing or whatever, and I can't do it. That's not going to fly. So if there's any risk of that happening, we cannot do it in September, which is
Okay,
why I'm
that's
talking about it now. Because if we're actually going to try and do it that soon, we're going to try and change the course of what we're doing here. And basically, after cabinets, we're going to work on starting to contact schools and trying to get this thing scheduled. Because we're going to have to be planning differently from what we've been thinking all along.
right. I think there is going to be a risk of buyer beware if we do this in September. Depending on, I don't know, depending on what we wanted to do, I think we could have much more sustained success in December because we could probably get multiple performances in multiple groups at places as well.
Bye, Christina. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
You know, like we don't have to put all of our eggs in this one basket if we focus on a thing in December because we'll just have that time and that freedom and that willing and able population. I'm honestly a bit, now that I think about it, I'm a bit reserved about doing it in September just because of all of that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. What do you guys think?
What do you think, Carly?
My gut reaction is I don't want to do that because I wasn't planning to do it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. That's just me being unprepared. So I can be talked into it. I'm just not convinced it's better yet, but I can be convinced. That's what I'm saying. If you guys would all really rather wait to December and you're all going to do it until December, I'm okay with that and I'll find a way to make it work. That's my position.
Right.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know. I just kind of have a gut feeling that the forecast is looking pretty fair for December. And I'm looking at, mostly sunny, slightly cloudy skies with a temperature of 75 degrees.
You're a weatherman now. That's lovely.
Even though it's going to be probably 60 to 55. But, what I'm saying is, I think, like, I know for a fact that I shouldn't mention me, but I just have a gut feeling December might be better. And if we can, maybe we should think about what our Decembers felt like. Maybe not this past December because of the pandemic, but maybe like sophomore year or junior year for Matthew.
Oh man!
So if you remember around that time, like what exactly you were doing, that might help. Because recitals. When's the last day for recitals in the fall?
Oh, I don't know. Well, that is also the problem with the end of the semester is everyone has their recitals then. But that's more of a spring problem than a...
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I could see this working because another upside to it is if we give people more time to prepare and say, like, we're doing this thing in December, if you want to do it, get involved now. That gives them several months, so then people might be more willing to do it than if we say we're doing this in 3 weeks. I mean, I'm not expecting that we would be able to get people in 3 weeks, but one thing we had discussed with Erica is the potential challenges of trying to combine it with chamber class and how we'll overwhelm the freshmen and stuff, so... I've just kind of lost faith in FSU students that we're going to be able to do this on any large scale at all. But I am certainly willing to try, because I've put this much effort into it already.
Hey, don't say too much because we're being recorded.
All right, well, we can cut this part off because Christina's gone.
Yeah.
I think that's true. This is something I talk about. I'm not, like, hiding any. This isn't off the record, whatever.
Like I said, like, we can't... I mean, I've said it before, but we can't worry or we can't think about the fact that, FSU will only do so much, yeah.
We need to talk to Erica and Tekla about it and anyone else who's planning on playing, but I'm not sure what the best way to do that is now, but...
Yeah, that'll just... I wouldn't worry about that. That'll just work out in the wash. And I have a feeling that we can cultivate some serious interest in however we decide to present this during one of the beginning chamber classes. And we might entertain some serious musicianship at the end of the semester in that respect too. I think there's a greater chance of pulling from that pool if we do this later.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can do this. So now I'm just rethinking the project as a whole. And I guess that is what we meant for this to be as a pilot group. Did we have as many people as intended? No, but that's just us figuring out what this resource guide is going to look like, and that's what we're actually going to bring to the school to teach more people how to do this, which is what we need to figure out with Dr. Jones, and we will. And by the start of the semester, we'll have that, and then we just